Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Diana Sanchez, and I'm with the TCU Alumni Association. I'm here with my colleague, Terrence Hood from the Career Center, and Hallie Crawford. I'm so excited to have you all join us. We're going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to get logged in before we get started with our special guest, Hallie, who will talk to us about 10 transferable skills to help you change careers. But again, we'll just give everyone a couple minutes to log in.
Yeah. Sometimes people are finishing lunch or getting it ready or whatever, because this is kind of their break while they're listening in.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make sure. Yeah, I've got everything open, so it should be okay. We've got a great number of people, it looks like, who signed up and are logging in too, which is awesome.
Okay. I'll allow my colleague Terrence Hood to introduce himself before we turn it over to Hallie. Terrence.
Well, hello, everyone. For those of you who have not met or don't know who I am, I'm Terrence Hood, and I work in the TCU Career Center, and I'm Associate Director for Alumni Career Services. So we work with all TCU alumni, all class years on career change, which is how I'm going to be talking about today, resume development, cover letters, LinkedIn, job searching. And so all alumni can make an appointment with me using Handshake. And so welcome everyone to our webinar today, and we'll turn it back over to Dana and Hallie.
Hallie, would you like to introduce yourself?
That would be great. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. Thanks, Terrence and Diana, for hosting us today and kicking things off and getting started. So I have worked with TCU. I need to count the number of years, but a proud partner of TCU to support alumni in all of their different career goals, kind of regardless of the situation. And what we're going to be talking about today is transferable skills that we feel are some of the top ones. And there might be others that come up kind of along the way or that you think of related to your industry and your role. But some of the majority of the, or the main and most important transferable skills that can help you change careers, regardless of your situation, whether a career change for you is inevitable if you've been laid off and you're looking to try or do something new, or whether you're just looking to try to do something new in the new year. So we're going to talk about all of these different kind of scenarios, and the advice that we'll give you will kind of go across the board, just by the way. So if we take a look at the next slide, quick introduction to me. I'm a certified career coach, speaker, and author. I've been coaching and training since 2002. So there's some gray hair going on up here, but there's a lot more going on under there. I turned 50 this year. So I love what I do. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. I have an undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt University and a grad degree from the University of Illinois. And the advice that we're going to give you today is advice that we give to all of our clients to help them figure out the best and most effective, but also realistic way to transition or change career paths. And as I said just a moment ago, I think that the advice that we're going to give you will go kind of across the board, regardless of where you are in your career transition. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different things related to the transferable skills that we want you to consider and be thinking about focusing on, as well as talking today too about how to update your resume and your materials to reflect those transferable skills. So if we take a look at this next slide, the reason why we're here today is so that you're not like the woman on the screen here in this image. Career change can be really overwhelming for people, even when it's a choice that you're making. It's a lot. Our jobs are critically important to us, not just because they pay our bills, but our, careers, I think, are a big part, or can be a big part of our identity. And just thinking about making a change, I understand that it can feel really overwhelming. And there's lots of different emotions that may come along with this, which is why we're here to help you today. It could be that you just don't know where to start. It could be that it's a scary proposition or prospect for you to think about, okay, how do I make this shift? What's the best way to go about it? And it's just unsettling to think about this. It can also be really exciting, and we want you to focus there, obviously. But we totally understand, and please know that you're not alone, and it's normal to feel a lot of different emotions regarding a career transition or change. And a lot of our clients will tell us too, and that's obviously part of why they come to us, that they're also unsure how to represent themselves effectively for another industry or a different role. And that's why we're here today, to help you figure out how to do all of these different things. And we want to talk with you along the way about how to manage those emotions a little bit as well. The reason why it's so important to focus on and think about and also update your resume and LinkedIn and everything else with your transferable skills is you really want to sell yourself effectively, because as we all know, and if you take a look at this next slide with the stats here, resumes are scanned really, really quickly. They only spend about 10 to 15 seconds. We all know that there are those applicant tracking system scanners that companies use now to kind of weed out the people that they want to bring in for an interview or even talk to. And job openings will attract around 250 plus resumes, even more so with things kind of going the way they are with layoffs, et cetera. But the good news is that you can sell yourself for another direction. I mean, this is honestly why we are in business, because we help people make these career transitions. So that's the good news. And the other good news I would say too is that although I know that layoffs are happening and continuing, the job market is still strong, and you know, the unemployment rate is still low. And so on the flip side of things, there are opportunities out there. You can make a change. But let's talk about these items on this next slide here on the right, because there's a couple of things we want you to do in order to have the right perspective about this. Because we don't want you to go into this with unrealistic expectations. So here's a couple of things. The right perspective to have about making a career change is you need to keep in mind that it's going to take some time. So this isn't flipping a light switch, and just because, let's say, you focus on your transferable skills, tomorrow you're going to get this brand new job. You need to be realistic about your timeline. You also need to understand and remember that 9 times out of 10, people find jobs through networking, recruiters, talking with other people. And when you're looking to make a shift or a career change, it's even more important to focus on those networking efforts, because in some way, shape, or form, you kind of need someone to like see you in a different light, or, you know, give you a break, so to speak, right? So be realistic about your time frame in terms of how long this might take. And if, for example, you're like, okay, I want to change jobs, but I also need to get a job as quickly as possible, it's okay to go ahead and go for that alternative career path that you're considering. But if bills are really critical right now and finances are really important to you, I would have a plan A and a plan B and say to yourself, even though I want to make this change or shift, do I need to do something in the meantime, or look at the same time for something that's similar to or exactly like I've been doing in the past while I work towards this longer term goal? Okay, so takes time is one of the perspectives to kind of adopt and just be realistic about. The second way that we want you to be realistic is we want you to be realistic about, even though you can be focusing on and selling your transferable skills, you have to realize too that you may not be able to make a really dramatic change. Or even if you are able to make a really dramatic change, there's always going to be stuff that you may need to compromise on a little bit. Like, are you going to have to take too much of a pay cut? So for example, you might do something that's similar to what you're doing in the, or have done in the past. You might look at something that's industry or role adjacent. You might work for or look at applying to companies or organizations that are vendors to your industry. The point here is that we want you to be realistic too about the types of jobs that you're applying to. And we have had people make really dramatic changes in their career. So I'm not saying that you can't, but you want to think about, okay, where are my priorities? What's most important to me right now? And I apologize, my dog was just shaking. What's really important to you right now, and there are going to be places that you may need to compromise a little bit in order to pay your bills, take care of yourself, find the right work environment, etc. And this leads us into our third kind of right perspective, if you will. Keep in mind too that no job is going to be absolutely perfect. Nothing is 100% all the time perfection, right? We have when our clients work with us, and we have clients contact us later and they love their jobs, right? But there always will be things, that tasks that you don't want to work on quite as much, or you don't enjoy quite as much, coworkers that maybe aren't your favorite. Don't put so much pressure on the career transition process that you're looking for a needle in a haystack and something that is going to be perfect every single second of the day. The key here is to be at choice where you're compromising, because we all have to compromise in some way, shape, or form, at least a little bit. And when you are choosing where you compromise, though, you're going to feel so much better than you would otherwise. So as you're going into this, and as we talk about the 10 transferable skills, we also want you to have the right perspective so that you're approaching things in the right way, okay? And we talked about these a little bit already, but I just want to piggyback on it for just a second at the bottom right-hand side here. In some cases for people, when they come to us at first, a lot of our clients will actually say, I'm so unhappy with my current career path, let's say, that I feel like I need to go do something completely different, like go be a chef or whatever. We actually had a client tell us that she worked at one of the big 4 consulting firms, and she literally said, you know, one of my career ideas is being a chef. I'm wondering if that's something I should try to do instead. And when it comes down to it, a lot of times for people, you can make a course correction and still be really happy, or that could be your ideal career path, okay? So we want you to think outside the box, and it's okay to look at career paths that are really, really different from what you're doing now, but also consider things that may be a slight course correction, because things like work environment, for example, can have a really big impact on our satisfaction. And the client that I was just referencing a second ago, it turned out for her that the work environment was one of the main problems. And so instead of being in a consulting role, like as an external consultant at a firm, she decided she wanted to be an internal consultant, do the same type of thing, but at one organization inside. And that was something very similar to what she had done in the past, but a different work environment. So industry role adjacent is totally okay to consider, because that actually could be a good fit. You may want to take a look at and consider vendors to your industry as another example. And in some cases, people decide they want to make a change within their organization. Some organizations are more open to this than others. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind, just in case, though. Let's take a look at our agenda for today on this next slide here. So we're going to talk today about 10 transferable skills, the things that we would recommend, excuse me, you focus on, consider, and think about, and some examples there. We'll then talk about formatting your resume in the right way to kind of leverage these transferable skills. And we will have time for Q&A at the end. Please have the chat box or the Q&A box open for yourselves, because you can put questions or even comments in there at any time. And if we have several questions come through kind of halfway through the webinar today, I'm happy to pause and answer those, but we will have time at the end for the Q&A too. As a quick kind of admin reminder, and then I'm going to sit back a little bit. I was telling Terrence and Diana that my office is a sunroom, which I love, but sometimes the sun gets in my eyes a little bit. If you'd like a copy of our slides, you can email us at admin@createyourcareerpath.com. And Diana, if you could put that in the chat, that would be fantastic. And also you will receive a copy of the recording for today as well too. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So I'd love it if we could launch actually our first poll here as we're starting to think about things. And I'm curious, out of those who are attending live today, what they struggle with the most. So if we could launch our first poll, that would be great. And our questions here are, it's pretty simple and straightforward. Do I need help with, or do I struggle most with identifying my transferable skills? Or do I struggle more so with selling my transferable skills? Or is it kind of all of the above in both of these? And Diana, if you could launch the first poll here, that would be great. I might be able to do it. Let me just see here. Hold on. Okay, that's awesome. Perfect. So give us your answer here and we'll give you a second. And it's okay if it's all of the above or both of the above. We're going to help you talk through kind of both of these situations. But it helps us also, I think, for you to know that you're not alone. These are kind of common things. And we'll give you a moment to complete this and then we'll keep going. And Diana, I think if we've got, close to a critical mass in a second, that's probably good. But I'm really curious what people say here. And my guess would be it's kind of all of the above, but we'll see. All right, cool. Let's check out the results. Okay, like we said, 54% are saying both of them. But what's interesting, I think, and really important and interesting to see too, is selling myself using them. So we are going to talk a little bit about identifying transferable skills today, but we'll focus more on how to sell yourself effectively there. And like we said, and I'll just close this out, thanks for participating. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to put them in there. I'm happy to answer. Don't feel like you have to hold everything to the last minute. All right, let's take a look at our first slide. In order to identify and understand what your transferable skills are, I'd like to suggest a couple of tools and exercises, and we'll show you those on the next couple of slides here. So one tool that we use with our clients all the time is our ideal career model. It's listed on this next slide here. So if you take a look, the areas where we would like you to kind of think about, or I guess brainstorm or identify some of your transferable skills would be these particular pieces of the model. Take a look at and identify what your top strengths are. And just by the way, if you're looking for a couple of good strengths assessments, we like the Strengths Finder assessment. TCU may offer some options for strengths or personality assessments. So ask for some information there from them. And then finally, one of the other websites, and actually I'm going to put this into the chat box that we find is helpful for strengths and other things, that's got some good like quizzes and stuff, is onetcenter.org. So make sure that you're really clear on what your top like 5 to 7 strengths are, and think of your strengths outside of your industry. Like, how can I think of these as more kind of generic where they could go across the board? The second place you can look for and identify transferable skills is from past education. Did you get a certification a few years ago? What classes did you take in your MBA or whatever it was, or in your undergraduate degree? Because those things could be relevant, even if it was a little while ago. Those are things that you can think about and could give you clues to what some of your transferable skills are. How have you leveraged the things that you've learned in those courses over time? Another place to look for and identify transferable skills is thinking about your past experience, and not just from your current job. So when you're identifying transferable skills and looking for relevant experience there, think of from the beginning of your career path. And then finally, transferable skills can also be identified or understood and kind of brainstormed from personality traits too. So transferable skills can also be kind of soft skills, if you will. Things like, do you have a really strong work ethic? And that would be relevant because you're going to be working in a high pressure environment. Or do you do really well under pressure? And that would be a transferable skill because that can kind of go across the board. Are you able to be really detail oriented even when you're working on strategic planning? So things related to or elements of your personality type, those soft skills, can actually be really good transferable skills to help you think about as well. And another way that we could that you can think about or start to identify transferable skills is to get clear on what your top leadership strengths are. Because even if you're not in a leadership position where you're managing other people, you still are a leader in your career, or as part of being, or as being a part of a team, or as part of your organization. Okay, So this is a leadership skills wheel that we use with our clients. It comes from Development Dimensions International. It's a highly regarded management consulting firm. And one of the ways that we would want you to identify additional transferable skills for yourself is to rate yourself in each of these areas and identify your top 3 to 5 strengths, because those things could be things that could transfer over. We suggest doing a self-evaluation where you're writing these out for yourself and kind of ranking yourself. But I also highly recommend you ask other people to rank you on these different things too, because there could be things that you don't fully realize because they come so naturally to you are actually really good transferable skills and strengths that not everybody has. So take a look at this wheel. This is another way to help identify and give you some language to help you sell some of your transferable skills too. Another way to understand and identify what some of your transferable skills might be would be to keep or create an accomplishments document. And it's a really good idea, whether you have one of these or not, get one started. It's not something that, it's separate from your resume, obviously, but where it helps you keep track of all of your accomplishments and results. And it could be in your current role, it could be in previous roles. But if you take a look at and think about, okay, what are the testimonials that I typically get from my clients, customers, and my team? What are the kudos that I get? What do people tend to compliment me on? That can help you understand what some of your transferable skills as well. What are these things? And thinking about even past performance reviews tell you about some of your top transferable skills. And the reason why I say this is because we are going to be talking about the top 10 skills that we see with our clients and kind of across the board that employers are looking for. But we also want you to, I guess the way to think about it is know that some of your transferable skills may not be on the lists that we're presenting today. And also, we want you to drill down with your transferable skills too, because for example, if you're looking at project management or program management as one of your transferable skills, we need to know a little bit more about that, like what types of projects or programs. So this is where it can help you drill down just a little bit further. And one of the final ways that we would recommend that you understand and identify and make sure that you uncover and are clear on all of your transferable skills. And I'm sorry, I don't know why this text is different colors here. I didn't mean to do that. Is to interview other people. Where do you excel, or where do they see you excel, and that you're stronger than other people that they know? What adjectives come to mind when they think of you? That can give you some really good clues to what your brand is, but also some of those transferable skills. What skills do they see that you have that you could actually use elsewhere? A lot of times someone else looking at us when we're not in, they're not in our own head, and having that objective opinion can help us clarify what some of these transferable skills are. And when you interview and talk with others, and you can tell them you attended this webinar and this coach told you to do this, because I know some people feel a little bit less comfortable with this than others. But if you even talk to friends and family members, it's a good idea to get a blend of different people in your life to get those varying opinions and kind of different perspectives on how you're coming across and what your skills are. Okay, so we just wanted to bring that up too. So let's dive into the specific top 10 transferable skills that we would recommend you consider when you're looking at changing careers and selling yourself more effectively. And as I said a moment ago, and as we go through these, we want you to drill down and get as specific as possible, because when you're changing into a different industry, let's say, but you're looking at, okay, I'd like to do project management, but do something there. You want to be as clear on what type of project management it is, even though it's not industry specific, okay? So let's look at the first one. Obviously, management is one of the ones that employers look for in some way, shape, or form. And you want to ask yourself and think about, okay, what are the types of things I want to promote about myself on my resume and on my LinkedIn? Is it managing others? And am I really good at, for example, managing large teams or small teams? Are they global teams or, local teams? All of those things can make a difference. So that's where you can get more specific, but you're not talking as much about industry or organization specific. You want to think about kind of genericizing, I hate to say that word because it sounds bad, but genericizing your language a little bit more on your resume and LinkedIn. So for example, is the majority of what you did in your current or previous job and past jobs mostly project or program management, or could you at least talk about it in that way? But then we'd like you to go into like, okay, operations project management, or get specific, like we've been saying. So you can ask yourself these questions. Where could I use this skill of management in another industry? And what would you need to learn or demonstrate that you know in order to explain to them, look, this may be a different type of role or job or industry, but it's basically project management, just like I did before. The second transferable skill we want you to consider and think about is, what are your technical skills? So we talked a little bit more and about like, you know, how do you drill down a little bit more, and also leveraging your soft skills. So two things I want you to think about here. Remember, we want you to talk about your soft skills, but it's a really good idea to talk also about your technical, very tangible skills as well. So technical skills are a big deal across the board, right? We can't get away without, in some way, shape, or form, for most jobs, or the majority of them, without working on the computer in some way, shape, or form. So you want to ask yourself, what software do I know? What apps do I have familiarity with? Am I good at leveraging data with technology, or, you know, operations with technology, or human resources technology? So get specific again with the type of role that you're in and maybe want to get into that would be relevant here. And in some cases, the technical knowledge or experience you have could be engineering, or it could be financial analysis or something like that too. So drill down as much as possible, but remember, we're kind of casting a wider net and having like a bigger picture umbrella a little bit too. I see a couple of questions and comments have come in, so let me just address those really quickly while we're here. So one person said, I have a specialty role in my area of my department. I'm a utilization review RN and cover specifically surgery patients. I don't know how to get that across in my resume, or strengths that may stick out. Or is that not something I can do in a way that resumes are looked at? This is a great example, and so thank you for asking. What I would say is, I understand like if you're specifically covering surgery patients, but what are the commonalities between surgery patients and non-surgical patients? What are the things that you have to do to help them with? Is there software you need to know, healthcare terminology that you already know that could translate elsewhere? Is it partly scheduling? Is it project management, or managing, you know, scheduling, or different departments? So I would actually say, and I think this is a great question and a great example, that there are transferable skills there, whether it's scheduling or some of the other things that you're talking about that could have to do with other types of RN or healthcare jobs and be relevant there. Okay, good. Thanks for asking that. And it looks like we've got one person that said, oh, Diana, I'm going to do this. And sorry, people get this. It's actually for the slides. It's createyourcareerpath.com. So I apologize for that, because a lot of people get confused with it. I put the correct email address for the slides where you can ask for those into the chat box. So that's updated there. So let's keep going. These are two of our transferable skills. Another place to look, or two more, would be communication skills. This is obviously a really big one for employers, and you can get more specific using some of the ideas here. So when you're talking about communication, that's pretty generic, right? But if you would look at some of the examples here, what we want you to do is drill down a little bit more. What type of communication? Is it marketing or public relations? Or no, it's more like account management and relationship building, because you're in more of a sales or business development role. Is it team leadership, conflict, or change management? Would these things be relevant to the jobs that you're applying to? Or could it be writing or presenting? These are some other examples that you can use for the kind of the header, if you will, or transferable skill of communication. Okay, so don't just say communication, get more specific there, but this is one of the soft skills that is really, really important for prospective employers and can go across the board. The next one we want you to think about at the bottom of this slide is critical thinking. This is another one that comes on the list of top 10 transferable skills for employers. And when we say critical thinking, again, let's get more specific. Is it problem solving? Like you're great at identifying possible problems or inefficiencies, and you're great at like operations, or is it more like strategic planning? So you can put problem solver in your resume, absolutely, but we want you to get more specific with it. What does this mean? What types of problems are you able to solve? How can you use, or how do you best use your critical thinking for what result? You always want to be as results oriented as possible. Let's take a look at our next set of transferable skills. Multitasking is generic. I would not necessarily say that actually as a keyword or as a word necessarily on your resume and LinkedIn profile. And if you do, we want you to explain it a little bit more. So there's lots of different multitasking, right? Are you great, for example, at working under pressure or deadlines? And remember, would that be relevant for the jobs you're applying to? Because if it is, add it in there. If it's not, leave it out. Managing multiple projects or accounts, same with teams and people. Are you really good, for example, at being detail oriented, but great at like identifying or working with the details, but then implementing those into a strategic plan? Do you have, for example, technical expertise, but you're also able to communicate with non-technical team members so you can like speak in layman's terms? So multitasking is another kind of generic transferable skill that is relevant for you to think about and help you identify what some of those more specific skills could be underneath. Let's look at the next few here. A couple of other transferable skills we want you to consider and think about are teamwork. Leading teams, is that the case for you, or is it better and make more sense for your relevant experience that I've worked within a team? But talk a little bit more about what types of teams they are. Are they large or small? Are they global or national or local? Are they really diverse, or is it a certain set? Like I'm great at managing, this is a silly example maybe, but I'm really great at managing accountants or working with accountants. Whatever it is, get specific there. Are you good at, if you're applying to jobs that are remote positions or hybrid positions, it's really good to talk in your resume about, you know, examples of I've worked remotely for this many years and been effective, and these are my results. Are you great with team communication, or you're better with, you know, making sure that your team is optimized and organized and efficient? So lots of different ways that we can play around with this transferable skill, if you will, of teamwork. And then creativity is another one too. And this is goes across the board, so many different thoughts here. Creative thinking, or are you actually a creative person, like you're a great graphic designer or good in with marketing? Are you a really good creative problem solver? These are different ways that you can think about creativity as a generic kind of transferable skill, but again, drill down a little bit more. And after we go through these, I want to give you a quick example before we dive into the resume tips too, of how one of our clients kind of tailored her resume to different jobs, but was able to adjust and play with her transferable skills. So I'll tell you that in just a second. These are our last 3 of the 10 transferable skills. Leadership is one, and we want you to think about what type. Is it team leadership? Is it operations leadership? Is it human resources leadership? Or is it industry specific, but you're looking to get into a different role? So I know we've been talking so far today, I think a lot about like, you might have the same role within a different industry. If you change it around and say, I want to stay in my industry, for example, but I want to be in a different role, you can talk about the leadership strengths that you've exhibited and how those can work well with this new type of role. You want to make sure when you're thinking about your leadership qualities, especially like we talked about with that leadership wheel, we only want you to talk about the ones that are going to be relevant to the positions that you're applying to. Leave out those that are not going to be as relevant. So for example, you may be going into an organization that you don't have to lead as much across generations, right? It may be that you're looking at a really small organization and most of them are really young, or it's a startup or whatever it is. So again, make sure your resume is going to be tailored each time. And then finally, the last two transferable skills are research and analytical, like analytical strengths or skills. What type of research are you good at? Data, marketing, etc. What are you able to do with that research? Are you able to perform the research itself and provide it to your supervisor or the CEO in order for them to make XYZ decisions? Do you manage the research more so, or do you report on it or plan from it? So again, getting more specific there. And then your analytical strengths and skills. For what purpose are you using them? What are the results? So for example, one of our clients, his analytical skills, he was in human resources consulting, and he shifted over into an internal role at a completely different type of organization and a completely different type of industry. But his job was to use data analysis in order to understand what the trends were, human resources wise, so they understood how do we project out how many people we need to be hiring every year? What is our turnover rate, and how do we reduce that to keep people happy and staying here? All of that kind of stuff. So with your analytical transferable skill, you want to think about, okay, what are the results of my work, and for what purpose am I using my analytical strengths? Okay, so let's start to talk about your resume, and let me give you a quick example. So one of our clients, she was in corporate fraud and investigations, and she was looking at two different types of jobs. One of the jobs she was looking at, and she was looking to relocate actually to Texas. One of the jobs she was looking at involved the managing corporate fraud program, but also investigations. So her resume was pretty standard or similar to what she had been doing in the past. But one of the other jobs, and both the jobs were in a completely different industry or different types of industries. One of the other jobs was managing the whistleblowing program. It had nothing to do, there was no investigation as part of it. So with her resume, every place that she had investigation, instead there she put program management, which was not a lie, because that is part of the things she had done. She worked at Coca-Cola at the time, but that's how she tailored it, using the right keywords and those transferable skills to make sure that she looked like, yes, I can do this job. So let's spend our next 5 minutes before we get to some more Q&A on your resume and kind of how to present yourself effectively with these transferable skills. So there's 3 criteria for your resume. It sells you, we all know that, but we also want you to focus on that your resume needs to brand you as well, and we'll show you what we mean by that. I want to be able to have someone pick up your resume and know exactly who you are, what type of job you're applying to, what skills you bring to the table, and start to create a picture of who this professional is. They're a marketing communications leader who's really good with data, for example. It's not just about selling you, it's branding you too. And then finally, we want your resume to help you feel really confident. That's an important critical piece too. So let's take a look at a few things here. So when you're thinking about transferable skills and selling yourself, we want you to look at 3 areas where you're going to make some adjustments to help promote yourself in this new direction. Your summary statement is where you should be putting some of your transferable skills, as well as your experience and your skills section. And we'll show you what we mean, some examples here kind of as we go, but that's where you're going to be focusing. And we don't feel like you have to change every single thing on your resume. In some cases, it may be similar to what we just talked about with the example I gave you, where you're plugging and playing some of these different keywords versus feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to revamp everything. It's going to depend on your situation, but I just wanted to put that out there because I know it can feel overwhelming. So with formatting, a couple of things we wanted to tell you here. You've probably noticed that resumes look fancy these days. They're not just the black and white. We have our clients use at least one color and gray shading in some cases and graphics in other cases, depending on their situation. And we do have templates that you can purchase from us. Happy to share those with you. Just email us, same thing. But the point here is we do recommend that you use a little bit more of a contemporary format so that your resume stands out a little bit more. And there's different ways that you can lay out your resume in order to focus on those transferable skills, okay? Couple of quick notes about formatting so that you're not like the woman on this screen and you feel good about it. And I'm not going to read through all of these. Two of the things that are really important to know about resumes these days with the scanning systems is that you don't want to put underlining on your resumes. You don't want to put live links in there because that can trip it up too. And you also don't want to have tables or columns because those can trip up some of the scanning systems. You want it to be formatting wise fancy, but also as kind of simple as possible on the back end with the formatting. And the templates we use kind of cover both bases. And that's why it's just important to be thinking about these things. Okay. So if we look at this next slide, as part of the formatting, just as a quick reminder, on the right-hand side, don't overuse bold, italics, or capitalization. Oh, sorry about that, everybody. That is an annoying thing that I can never figure out a way to get it off my computer. We find that people overuse those things, use them only to highlight certain sections of your resume or portions. And as a reminder too, you want to always, before you email someone your resume or upload it onto a job board or, into a job application, you want to transfer it into a PDF because then it's going to hold the formatting. Otherwise, it could look really wonky if they have a different version of Word, okay? One of the things specific to thinking about transferable skills is when you're trying to sell yourself, in some cases, what you may want to do is use excerpts from your LinkedIn profile or testimonials that you've gotten from people in the past to speak to some of those transferable skills. And you could consider putting those in your experience section, okay? If you're gonna do something like this, make sure that you keep it really short and sweet and only use ones that references strengths for that specific job. But we like this as an idea because it's a third-party endorsement, can help sell you for that new direction, okay? And just kind of helps bolster your case, so to speak. If we take a look at this next slide, we want to talk with you about, and hold on, let me advance it. My computer's a little pokey today. Okay, we want to talk for a second about branding. And Diana, when you're ready, if you could launch our second poll here, that would be great. This header on this resume is not something that you absolutely have to do. This is just one example of many that we have for our clients. But what I want you to get from this is a couple things. We want you to have your LinkedIn profile on here, and we want you to have any relevant certifications or education because those can transfer over. And it's a great idea to have a branded statement and even maybe a few keywords. And let me move just a little bit because the sun's getting in my eyes. That sells you for this new direction. So if you see here, this person is not talking about industry specific language or role specific language. And this can help kind of sell her for a different direction. So we'd love to hear, we'll give you a second to complete this next poll. And I don't know that I'm gonna be able to totally get out of the, oops, sorry guys, the sun here. So I'm just gonna deal with it for now, but we'd love to hear if you have a branded banner on your resume or not. And we don't mean it has to exactly look like this, but that you've got something that kind of sells you and you've got like a quick tagline there. Love to hear about that. If you just give us a yes or no, that would be great. And I've got a question that came through, so I'm going to answer that while we're waiting on the poll. One person asked, how far do you go back on jobs on your resume? We usually recommend if it's older than 10 years that you don't put it on your resume. But if you're concerned about a gap between graduation and your, when you first started your career, it's okay to put an older position, but you can just list the job title and the dates and that's it and move on. So let's look at our results here, how many people have a branded header. Okay, 78% don't. That's okay. That's why you're here. You're not alone. A lot of people don't have something like this. Remember, it doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this is one of the things that you really want to focus on because it can help you market and sell your transferable skills, because this again is like, okay, this is who this person is. And they can do this, same type of job that they've done before, but in this new industry, etc. Let's take a look at our next slide. And this is the tagline. The things that you want to be thinking about with the example that we just talked about are some of your unique selling points. We want you to include in your summary statement and a little bit in your tagline too, your soft skills as well as technical skills. And a good way to think about creating a tagline for yourself, and obviously we do this for clients all the time, is what are you known for? Like if you walked out of a room and people were saying really great positive things about you in terms of they're your former or current coworkers, what would they be saying? That can help you come up with your possible tagline. Let's take a look at our next slide. And one of the things I wanted to point out from this one. Now you'll notice this one is a little more old school. We would want this guy to have a little bit of color here, etc. The thing that I want you to focus on, and the reason why I have this pulled up as an example though, is because this person has got their header up here. You know what type of professional they are and what types of jobs they're going for. There's some good keywords here too about their strengths and skills. And this is the kind of stuff, again, that can be transferable skills. But another way to lay out your experience in your summary, as well as in your experience section, moving towards transferable skills would be to have them, your bullets be under specific headers. So marketing focus leader, etc., versus just listing out your results. If you organize your bullet points according to some of your transferable skills, what we consider this is kind of like a hybrid version of a chronological and a functional resume. And this is just one example of how to lay that out. Okay, so I wanted to show you that before we go to our next slide here. So let's take a look at the next one. We already talked about this, so I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I did want to say two things from here. We want you, like we said, to tailor your resume to each position. And what we would recommend is that you have a master resume that you create all of your resumes from. Your master resume has everything on it. And you can highlight, for example, in yellow, the places where you may need to adjust some of your keywords, okay? So that's what we did with the client we were just talking about. And Diana, if we could launch our third and last poll here for today, that would be great. Your master resume is not a resume that you're ever going to send to anybody, because it may even have some of your notes in there, as well as your highlights and ideas about different keywords that you can use. But it helps you ensure and stay organized that you've covered all of your bases, and you can just kind of plug and play the different keywords that would be relevant for the jobs you're looking for. When you're tailoring your resume to each position, especially when you're looking to move over and change careers, you want to make sure that you get rid of any industry specific language or lingo or things that your company, like acronyms that only your company uses, because they're going to read into that and be like, okay, this person is very Salesforce oriented or whatever it is. So let's take a look at our results from our poll. If we could, that would be great. And the majority of people do. I see these numbers going up, which is fantastic. So 63% do, that's awesome. 30%, 7% don't. For those of you who don't, this is probably one of the things that you want to be focusing on and working on, okay? So master copy of your resume can be really, really helpful. And on this next slide, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because I want to make sure we've got a couple minutes for Q&A too. But this again is where you want to make sure that you've got relevant strengths and experience. And these are some examples of some transferable skills, piggybacking on what we talked about earlier, that you may want to add into or include in your resume and on your LinkedIn profile. And if you look at the very bottom here on the left-hand side, this is what I was saying earlier about make sure you get rid of any industry-specific language. And in some cases, what you may be doing to highlight or identify or point out your transferable skills is you may want to think about, okay, kind of what's the generic way to talk about this strength or experience I've had, okay? The other place we want you to think about your transferable skills is to add them in this skills section here. This is really important for those applicant tracking system scanners. And this is another place where you want to consider adding in or incorporating your transferable skills. Okay, let's pause here for just a second. And before we get to Q&A in just a moment, if anyone feels like they need a little bit of help with this, we're happy to talk with you about our services. You can just email us at the same email address that it would be to get the slides. And we do give a discount for TCU alum if you feel like you need a little bit more help with any of these things we're talking about, because I know that it can feel a little bit overwhelming, and having that kind of additional perspective can help. I did want to mention something too before we get to Q&A about chronological versus functional versus hybrid resumes on this particular slide. We tend to like, when you're in career change mode, instead of like a chronological resume, using a hybrid where it's a combination of chronological and functional. And what we mean by that is doing it like, or creating your summary and your experience section in categories, like we said earlier. Okay. And let me just show you actually an example here on this next slide of what you can do to help kind of organize your experience section. So you can do the same type of thing, and this would be a hybrid version of a functional and chronological, where you list your jobs in chronological order, but you have your experience section broken out into your transferable skills. This is an example of how you can do that. So you're still sticking with that chronological format, which is the preferred format for most employers and recruiters. And then finally, we want you to be confident about your transferable skills. Okay, so as you're thinking about making this change and transition, identify the areas where you feel a little bit less confident, and figure out ways that you can work on that so that you feel really good going into interviews and applying for jobs, etc. And please know that transferable skills are completely relevant. Like, there's so many cases where if you've been doing, a certain type of job in one industry, it can be easy in a lot of ways to translate that into another industry. And if you don't know enough about that new industry, for example, do you need to take a class to brush up on it or something like that? Okay, let's get to our Q&A. And I would love it as we go through this, and we'll make sure that we'll end like at least a couple minutes before the hour, so you all can move on to your next appointment after this. But I'd love it if you would write down and even share in the chat box one action step that you will take in the next week. We've got a couple of possible examples there, and our email address is there for the slides as a reminder too. Okay. So we've got several good questions. We'll get to as many of these as we can, but just by the way, if we don't get to your question, please feel free to email me, same email address. I'd be happy to answer virtually that way too. On formatting, first question, what about indented bullet points? Functional marketing, no, actually, we're gonna put the master bullet points. No. Indented bullet points tend to be okay. It's more tables and columns that are problematic. So indented bullet points, they're okay. Another person asked, how do the resume templates you're suggesting parse? I've noticed that often my summary is plugged into an experience section. I'm not sure I totally understand, but what I would suggest is you want to have your header, you want to have a summary section, you want to have a skills section, and then you want to have your experience section. And yes, you may have, like, the difference between your experience section and your summary is that your experience section is going to give the tangible results, the numbers, the exact things, the results that you achieved, versus your summary statement is going to be a little bit more generic. I hope that answers. Another person asked, should we avoid putting clickable links on the resume? Yes, do not put clickable links on your resume. In the header, it's sometimes okay, but honestly, I would avoid clickable links everywhere just to be safe. So with your LinkedIn profile, I know it looks like it was live in the other, in one of the examples we gave. Make sure that you don't have any live links at all in your resume. That's the rule of thumb. So thanks for asking so I can clarify. Another person asked, do something that provides more stability, great way to market more sales and entrepreneurial skills over to a structured corporate setting. So I would just honestly be focusing on your sales and entrepreneurial skills and talking about those, but look at the job descriptions and what types of sales are they talking about? Like, like with a corporate setting, they may have a more structured sales process. So can you talk about that a little bit? And like, I followed a structured sales process. So think about what would be different in a corporate setting versus others. More structure, larger organization. You have to multitask a little bit more. You have to work within teams. And those are the types of things that you want to focus on. Great question. Thanks for asking. The number of pages for a resume when you have recently graduated within like the last 4 years, give or take, is going to be 1 page. And beyond that, it's going to be 2 pages. So just as a kind of standard for there. Another question is this process different for a person that has 20 years of work history? No, it would be the same. You will just have more to pick and choose from in terms of your relevant or transferable experience and expertise. So it is, for the most part, the same, like 99%. Another person asked, I've been at the same company for 18 years, but have had 3 promotions to different levels. Highlight the most recent level and list the previous roles, only showing the time frame. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would have your organization or company name and location and all of that right there. And then with each of your job titles, because it shows really good progression and that you've gotten promotions, have next to those job titles the dates and also what you accomplished in each of those jobs. Okay, good. I think we answered that. Next question. Another question is, I have 10 years experience in my creative artist role in retail. I've heard using chronological in this case shows my age. So yeah, so chronological can do that. And that's one of the problems with it in terms of the ageism concern. So if you're really concerned about that, in some cases, I would consider using like a functional resume. But honestly, like what I would err on the side of if I were you in this particular situation is I would just leave off some of your older roles versus heading in the functional resume direction. I think with the common advice you offer to teachers looking to move into the corporate world, how different the work environment is going to be, and making sure that you're using corporate language versus education specific language on your resume, because those are 2 completely different things. Another question is, what are guidelines in addressing gaps in employment? And then I think this is the last question we can do for today, Diana. Guidelines in addressing gaps, especially since your last position. I would put in there what you've been doing in the meantime. I wouldn't have just an empty space. So talk about volunteer work that you've worked on. It's okay to say that you were laid off and this is what you've been doing in the meantime. So I would put something like that on your LinkedIn, but I would also fill the gap with something so that it's not just totally empty space. So classes, whatever it is that you've been doing. Okay, good. And we've got some good people in the chat box saying what their action steps are, which is great. So if we didn't get to your question today, please feel free to email me at admin@createyourcareerpath.com. I'm happy to answer, no problem, even if your question comes up later. And Diana, are there any closing thoughts that you want to kind of share before we go?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. I hope this was helpful. I know it's a lot. I tend to cram in a lot in there, but I err on the side of being more helpful, hopefully, than not. And as a reminder, if you want the slides, you just email us and you will receive a copy of the recording. We hope you have a great day.
All right, Holly, thank you again for another wonderful webinar session. I know this would be very helpful for a lot of people that want to change careers. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with today's session and the recording. We appreciate your time, and thank you again, Hallie and Terrence. We look forward to seeing you all soon. Go Frogs.
Yay. Bye.